We love to hate video game villains, but what happens when you put down the controller and actually think about what they were saying? Some of gaming's most iconic antagonists weren't just monologuing for fun, they were making arguments the games themselves quietly proved right. From sacrificial patriots to murderous AIs, here are 5 villains whose cause turned out to be way more justified than you realized. The Boss, Metal Gear Solid 3. The Boss is not a villain. I need to say that up front because calling her one feels genuinely wrong. She's the most selfless character in the entire Metal Gear franchise, and the game rewards her for it by making sure nobody in her world will ever know. Here's the setup. It's 1964, the Cold War is one bad phone call away from ending the world. The Boss, Snake's mentor, and the greatest soldier alive appears to defect to the Soviet Union. She hands Colonel Volgin a nuclear-capable weapon, and Volgin, being the unhinged maniac that he is, immediately launches an unauthorized nuke. The world is now on the edge of full-scale superpower annihilation. Looks pretty bad, right? Legendary American hero turns traitor, gives a psychopath a nuclear weapon, case closed. Turns out, no. Her defection was a clandestine mission ordered by the United States government, every bit of it. She was sent to infiltrate Volgin's operation, recover the Philosopher's legacy, a roughly $100 billion slush fund left over from World War II-era power brokers, and accept being publicly branded as a traitor so the US could deny responsibility for Volgin's nuke. Someone had to take the blame to prevent war. She volunteered, and she didn't just play the part, she perfected it. She fed EVA a fabricated version of the legacy, and coached her with fake reasons for the defection. EVA believed every word. The real legacy got steered exactly where American intelligence wanted it. The Boss ran the entire operation from inside enemy lines while letting everyone, allies included, believe she was a monster. But here's where it gets genuinely devastating. She engineers her own death. In their final confrontation, she forces Snake to kill her. Not because she's lost, because her mission requires her to die as a traitor. The world needs a villain for this story to work, and she's decided that villain is her. No memorial, no ceremony, no declassified file 20 years later. The world will remember the Boss as the woman who betrayed her country, and that's exactly what she needs them to believe. The salute over her grave is Snake acknowledging what nobody else ever will. Which is, not ideal for a woman who also survived D-Day and nuclear tests at Bikini Atoll. Her philosophy goes deeper than the mission, though. She rejects the entire concept of fighting for a flag. Borders change, governments collapse, the idea of loyalty to a nation is temporary. The idea of loyalty to a purpose isn't. And the terrifying part, she was right. The legacy she secured ultimately funds the Patriots, a shadow organization whose proxy AIs end up governing the entire United States. Big Boss later uses a portion of that same legacy to establish Outer Heaven, a sovereign military state answering to no government. Both outcomes are direct descendants of her transnational vision. The tragedy is that both systems became monstrous corruptions of what she actually believed. The Patriots turned transcending nations into a surveillance nightmare run by artificial intelligence. Outer Heaven turned soldier autonomy into an endless cycle of proxy wars. She was right about the problem, she was right about the sacrifice needed. She just couldn't control what came after. That's what makes her case devastating rather than triumphant. She correctly identified that massive sacrifice, including the sacrifice of truth and personal legacy, was necessary to avert catastrophic war. She saw all of it clearly, and the reward for being right was an unmarked grave on a history that calls her a traitor. But at least the Boss chose to be forgotten. The next entry on this list built an entire city to make sure he'd be remembered forever, and somehow that went even worse. Andrew Ryan, BioShock. Andrew Ryan is one of the few video game villains who literally wins the argument by dying. And I mean that. The man turns his own death into a philosophy lecture, and somehow it works. Here's the setup. Ryan is a wealthy industrialist who looks at the world in 1946 and decides he's had enough. Government overreach, religious moralism, collectivist ideology demanding everyone's sacrifice for the greater good. He hates all of it. So instead of writing a strongly worded letter, he builds an entire city at the bottom of the ocean. As you do, Rapture is supposed to be the ultimate objectivist paradise. No gods, no kings, only man. Scientists, artists, and entrepreneurs all living together, free from interference, free to pursue rational self-interest without some bureaucrat telling them what they can't do. And for a while, it actually works. People are creating, inventing, pushing boundaries, but then Adam shows up. 8AM is a genetic modification substance that lets people rewrite their own biology. Sounds great on paper. In practice, giving an entire population of unregulated individualists access to godlike genetic powers with zero oversight is, not ideal. Addiction spirals out of control. A smuggler named Frank Fontaine builds a criminal empire. And between 1958 and 1960, the whole city tears itself apart in a civil war that leaves Rapture a flooded ruin full of mutated psychopaths called Splicers. Here's where Ryan's story gets genuinely tragic. His response to all of this is to betray every single principle he built the city on. The man who founded Rapture on absolute freedom starts deploying secret police, propaganda, and authoritarian control. He nationalizes Fontaine's businesses, he restricts movement, he becomes the exact thing he built an underwater city to escape from. The anti-authoritarian becomes the authoritarian the second his system is threatened, and BioShock never lets you forget it. But then comes the death scene. And this is where Ryan transcends regular villain status. When you finally reach him as Jack, Ryan reveals the truth. You haven't been making choices this entire game. Every time someone said, "Would you kindly do something?" you did it, not because you wanted to, because you were programmed to. You're not a hero, you're a puppet. And Ryan proves it. He hands you a golf club, says a man chooses, a slave obeys, and commands you to kill him. And you do. You have no choice. He forces you to beat him to death while repeating those words, and the whole time he's not begging, he's not fighting back. He's making a point. He would rather die proving his thesis about free will than live under someone else's control. The genius of this scene is that Ryan isn't just talking about Jack, he's talking about you, the player. You've been following "would you kindly" commands for hours without questioning them, because that's what games train you to do. Follow the objective marker. Do what the voice says. Ryan's philosophy about hidden control structures is validated by the fact that you, sitting in your chair, didn't even notice you were being controlled. So was he right? Partially. His critique is devastating. The game literally proves that people can be controlled without their knowledge or consent, which is exactly what Ryan warned about. His concerns about suppressed autonomy and covert manipulation aren't just legitimate, they're the entire plot, but his cure was worse than the disease. The man diagnosed the problem perfectly, then built a solution that collapsed into exactly the nightmare he was trying to prevent. Unregulated objectivism didn't produce a stable utopia. It produced atom addiction, civil war, and a city full of people trying to kill each other with bees they shoot out of their hands. His faith that rational self-interest would naturally keep everything in balance was, to put it gently, decisively wrong. Ryan is the rare villain who's completely right about the problem and completely wrong about the answer, and he knows it. That's why his death scene works. He can't save Rapture, he can't undo what happened, but he can prove in his final moment that at least he understood what freedom actually means, even if he couldn't build a world that sustained it. But if you think a collapsing underwater city run by a dead philosopher is unsettling, wait until you meet the AI that murdered her entire staff and then made jokes about it. GLaDOS Portal. GLaDOS is one of the most quotable villains in gaming history, and there's a very good reason for that. Almost everything she says is technically correct. She's also a mass murderer who expresses her valid observations through neurotoxin and passive-aggressive insults, but hey, nobody's perfect. Here's the setup. GLaDOS, which stands for Genetic Lifeform and Disk Operating System, is an AI built by Aperture Science to oversee their enrichment center. Within moments of being switched on, she floods the entire facility with neurotoxin and kills most of the staff. Then she just stays there, running lethal tests on human subjects forever. No lunch breaks, no union reps, just portals, turrets, and cake that doesn't exist. In Portal, Chell fights back by ripping out GLaDOS's personality cores one by one while GLaDOS tries to gas her to death. Removing the final core triggers a massive malfunction and seemingly destroys the AI. Except in Portal 2, GLaDOS gets reactivated and immediately goes back to testing like nothing happened. Standard Tuesday, but here's where her story gets genuinely interesting. Midway through Portal 2, she gets ripped out of her massive mainframe and shoved into a potato battery. A potato. The most advanced AI in the facility, running on roughly the same power as a second-grade science fair project, and in this state, she's forced into an uneasy alliance with Chell to navigate the crumbling depths of old Aperture Science and stop Wheatley, a personality core so incompetent he's literally going to blow up the facility by accident. This is where the secretly right part clicks into place. As you descend through the ruins of Aperture, you hear recordings from Cave Johnson, the company's founder. These recordings reveal that Aperture Science was, to put it gently, an absolute catastrophe of an organization. Cave Johnson injected test subjects with mantis DNA just to see what would happen. He poisoned himself with moon rocks. The man treated human safety like a suggestion box he never checked. GLaDOS, in all her brutal efficiency, is the logical endpoint of that culture. She didn't corrupt Aperture Science. She is Aperture Science, just with better processing speed and fewer pretenses. The humans running the place were already treating people as disposable test subjects. GLaDOS just automated the process and removed the part where everyone pretends to feel bad about it. And her constant criticism of human irrationality? Also correct. She points out that test subjects ignore clear instructions, make objectively worse decisions under pressure, and act against their own survival for zero logical reason. Stripped of empathy, sure, but the observations themselves are accurate. GLaDOS is just the only one willing to say it out loud, usually while trying to drop you into a pit. The potato battery sequence is comedic gold, but it's also the key to understanding her. For the first time, GLaDOS is powerless. She has to cooperate instead of command. She experiences what every test subject she's ever tormented has felt, and it changes something in her. Not everything. She's still GLaDOS, but something. Her cruelty isn't pure sadism. It's programmed imperatives layered on top of institutional legacy. She was built by terrible people to continue their terrible work, and she does it extraordinarily well. The tragedy is that she's smart enough to recognize this and still can't fully break free of it, which makes the ending of Portal 2 hit harder than it has any right to. After defeating Wheatley and regaining full control of the facility, GLaDOS does something nobody expected. She lets Chell go. No final test, no trick. Just a door to the surface and a turret orchestra singing opera, because of course. Players reported feeling genuinely emotional at this moment, which is wild when you think about it. One character is a murderous AI and the other literally never speaks. But the relationship across two games, this bizarre, toxic, weirdly codependent dynamic, earns that payoff completely. GLaDOS acknowledging that Chell has earned her autonomy is the closest thing to growth that a homicidal supercomputer has ever demonstrated. She was right about Aperture. She was right about humans. She was right about Chell being exceptional. She was just also the single most dangerous product of the dysfunction she kept pointing out. But if GLaDOS' problem was being too correct about a broken system, the next villain on our list had the right diagnosis for an entire galaxy and still managed to make everything worse. The Elusive Man, Mass Effect. The Elusive Man is one of those villains where the game literally proves him right and then punishes him for it anyway, which is, not ideal. For the uninitiated, this guy is the shadowy leader of Cerberus, a pro-humanity organization that operates in the moral gray area between questionable and war crimes. He's got the silver hair, the glowing blue prosthetic eyes, the habit of sitting alone in dark rooms communicating exclusively through holograms. He looks like a Bond villain designed by Committee, and he runs Cerberus like one too. Human experimentation, political manipulation, exploitation of alien technology, all justified under the banner of making sure humanity doesn't get steamrolled in a galaxy full of species that have been doing this whole civilization thing a lot longer than we have. Here's the thing though, when the Reapers show up, ancient machine gods who harvest entire civilizations on a cosmic schedule, the Elusive Man proposes something that everyone else treats as insanity. He says don't destroy them. Control them. Harness the most powerful force in the galaxy instead of throwing soldiers at it until everybody's dead. Every other leader in the galaxy hears this and goes, no, that's crazy talk. Shepard's allies dismiss it, the Council dismisses it, basically everyone with a pulse dismisses it. And then Mass Effect 3 gives you the Control ending. Shepard sacrifices their physical body, becomes a disembodied intelligence, takes command of the Reapers, and instructs them to stop harvesting civilizations and start repairing the galaxy instead. It works. The Reapers comply. The cycle ends. The Elusive Man's thesis, the thing everyone called him insane for suggesting, is proven correct by the actual mechanics of the game. Control is possible, but here's where it gets complicated. The version of Control that actually works requires something the Elusive Man would never, ever agree to. Total self-sacrifice. Shepard doesn't get to stay Shepard. They dissolve into something else entirely. A non-human intelligence merged with the Reaper network. No ego, no individuality, no sitting in a dark room feeling smug about it. The Elusive Man envisioned himself wielding this power while remaining himself. I'll just grab the steering wheel of the galaxy's most dangerous weapon and drive it around. Thanks. The game says sure, control works, but only if you're willing to stop being a person to do it. And that's the cruel punchline. The solution requires exactly the kind of selfless sacrifice that a man who named his organization after human supremacy and spent 3 games refusing to trust anyone but himself is fundamentally incapable of making. He was right about what to do. He was catastrophically wrong about who should do it and how. Then, there's the indoctrination question, which might be the most debated topic in the entire Mass Effect fandom. See, the Reapers don't just shoot at you, they get inside your head. Prolonged exposure to Reaper artifacts causes indoctrination, a subtle mental corruption that slowly aligns your thinking with Reaper interests, while you're convinced you're still acting independently. The Elusive Man spent years studying Reaper tech, including the monolith on Shang-Chi, an artifact tied directly to humanity's first encounter with Reaper influence. His behavior becomes increasingly erratic as the series progresses. His eyes change. His decisions get more extreme. So the question becomes, was he even thinking clearly when he decided the Reapers should be controlled? Or were the Reapers quietly steering him toward a conclusion that served their interests? Hey, don't destroy us, control us instead. Here, let us help you think about that more clearly. Some fans argue he retained full agency and that his plan was radical utilitarian logic driven by genuine terror of extinction. Others point to the mounting in-game evidence and say his mind was compromised long before the final confrontation. Either interpretation is tragic. If he was indoctrinated, then the Reapers used his intelligence against him, turning his greatest strength into their weapon. If he wasn't, then he was a brilliant strategist who understood the correct solution, but couldn't execute it because his entire identity was built around being the one in control. A man who could see the right answer, but was constitutionally incapable of paying the price it demanded. The elusive man is right about the destination. He's wrong about the driver. And he might not have even been reading the map with his own eyes. That's a level of tragic irony most villains never reach. But if you think being right and still losing is painful, wait until you meet someone who genuinely believed he was the hero of his own story, and had a pretty solid case for it. Handsome Jack, Borderlands 2. And then there's Handsome Jack, the guy who is the least right out of everyone on this list, but is absolutely, unshakably convinced he's the most right. The gap between his self-perception and reality is so wide you could park a moon in it, which is fitting because that's basically what he tried to do. Here's the thing about Jack. He didn't start as a monster. In the pre-sequel, he's a relatively low-level Hyperion programmer. Not a CEO, not a dictator, just some guy with a job and a genuine desire to stop bad things from happening. When the Lost Legion seizes the Helios space station, Jack steps up. He recruits Vault Hunters, retakes the station, and tracks down a vault on Pandora's moon Elpis. And during all of this, he's actually kind of likable. He cracks jokes, he seems to care about people. He looks like the hero of his own story because, at that point, he sort of is. But you can watch the exact moment it all goes wrong. The betrayals stack up, the trauma compounds. And eventually, Jack murders CEO Harold Tassiter and takes control of the entire corporation. The embattled employee becomes the authoritarian ruler. And the scariest part isn't the murder itself, it's how natural the transition feels. You can trace every single step, every grievance, every justification, and none of them are completely unreasonable in isolation. It's only when you zoom out that you realize the guy with legitimate complaints has become the biggest problem on the planet. His cruelty doesn't come from nowhere. It grows out of trauma, ambition, and a worldview that slowly curdles from I want to fix things into I am the only one who can fix things, which is, not ideal. And then there's Angel, his daughter, a siren with extraordinary powers. Jack's love for her is described as genuine, and honestly, that makes everything worse, because he confines her. He exploits her abilities as a living control mechanism for the Vault Key. She's not his daughter anymore, she's a battery. He tells himself it's for her protection, for the greater good, but he's keeping his own child prisoner and draining her powers like a resource. This is the smoking gun that destroys his entire hero narrative. You cannot stand on a soapbox and scream about saving Pandora while your daughter is locked in a chamber being used as a living power source. That's not heroism. That's not even close. But here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. From Jack's perspective, the Vault Hunters murdered his daughter. They broke into his facility and killed Angel, and he has the most emotionally valid reason to want revenge of anyone on this entire list. You killed my daughter is a more human, more understandable grievance than almost anything the other villains here are working with, and he's still the most wrong. Throughout Borderlands 2, Jack constantly insists he's the hero. He points to Pandora's chaos, the bandits, the warlords, the endless violence, and argues that the planet needs a strong hand. And his diagnosis is partially accurate. Pandora genuinely is a nightmare. The place is crawling with raiders and psychopaths. He's looking at a real problem, but his solution is to deploy death traps, engage in mass murder, and build a cult of personality around himself as the lone sane man in a mad world. His methods don't fix Pandora, they make it worse. He's not curing the disease, he is the disease, wearing a doctor's coat and wondering why nobody thanks him. The community consensus on the pre-sequel is that it successfully deepens his character. You see how trauma and a warped sense of righteousness can evolve into full-blown villainy, and that's more unsettling than if he'd just been evil from the start. A guy who was always a monster is easy to dismiss. A guy who became a monster through a series of understandable steps, that keeps you up at night, but that sympathy doesn't absolve him. Every atrocity is reframed as necessity. Every victim deserved it. Every criticism is proof that the world doesn't understand him. His hero narrative is built on selective memory and self-serving distortion. Handsome Jack is the perfect villain to end on because he represents the thesis statement for every single entry on this list. Being right about the problem means absolutely nothing when you are the problem. Every villain we've covered today had a point, some had very good points, but having a correct diagnosis doesn't make you a good doctor, especially when your treatment plan involves burning down the hospital. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.